What do you get when a London-raised American South African and a New York-raised Moroccan
meet on the interwebs and become instant soul sisters? One of them, an Ayurvedic practitioner and transformation coach, and the other, a Conspire breathwork coach and Reiki master teacher. Both obsessed with wellness, family, entrepreneurship, relationships, and the magic of human expansion and growth. You get a whole convo.
We truly believe that with an open heart, focused mind, and energy receptive to the possibilities, your wellness journey can guide you to a life that exceeds your wildest dreams.
Welcome to our podcast. We're Ella and Iman, and we are so happy you're here. Come vibe with us as we explore the wholeness of being through the lens of wellness.
Welcome to A Whole Convo with Ella and Iman. Iman, how are you doing?
I am doing amazing, sis. So excited. Welcome, everyone. Today's episode, I feel like, is a juicy, deep one.
Oh, yes.
Well-being, the most important legacy of all.
Whoa.
Is it? Is our well-being the most important legacy of all?
Well, Iman, I don't know about you, but I'm going to say 100% yes. What do you think?
1,000% yes for me.
Oh, she upped the ante.
Forget 100 times that by 10. Okay, first of all, when you shared this title and topic with me, I lit up because so my mind went to so many places because when I was like, oh, Ella, I love that. Like, where was your head at? What are your thoughts about this? And when you started talking about our family upbringing, like our trauma, the responsibility I feel like we have, especially I think people in general, but I think women in our generation and our age group, let's say 30 to 50, right? I feel like have such a massive responsibility in literally redefining, rewiring, rejuvenating their mental health, their physical health, their emotional health, so that the future and so that the world and so that their life and relationships are actually coming from a place of wholeness versus the baggage and the trauma and the patterns that our family, our parents, our grandparents were not given the resources or even have the awareness of even wanting to impact their well-being in a sense that it is a legacy. So that's where my head is at. I'm excited about talking about this. I'm gonna give the mic over to you, girl.
I love to feel your energy on this one, Iman. I loved, like you saying, yeah, you got lit up, and it was a sight to behold because before we came on for the podcast and we were just kind of talking back and forth, you literally jumped forward and
Should have been recording that.
I missed the trick.
You can't stop recording ever when we're together, period.
I really did miss a trick there. So for me, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's been a theme in my life. I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly as my girls are going into the world and being their own people and forging relationships and forging patterns and forging behaviors that impact who they then go on to be and have that impact out into the world. And then because the feedback that comes from that is determined by so many things that I have or haven't instilled in them, that I have or haven't consciously and unconsciously passed on to them. And we have lots of conversations in our house because I spent a lot from as young as I can remember when I understood the impact of my relationship with my mum, particularly because we had a very challenging relationship. When I began to see the effects of that relationship, and I can maybe from the ages of about 13, 14, 15, looking at how that made me feel and looking at how that caused me to behave and the reactions it would stir up in me. So it's always been a particular fascination of mine, understanding the impact of that relationship. And then as I've matured, looking at how the unintegrated parts started playing out with me. And my children were the biggest barometer for me to recognize the unhealed parts of me and to
Oh,
recognize, because people talk about a lot about their children being their biggest teachers. And this is so true, particularly when we have children that are the same sex as us, because it was like there's certain points of my development when my children hit those milestones and hit those ages, it was like throwing back so much stuff
hmm.
of my childhood that was painful, that was challenging, that was traumatic, and understanding that they were not doing it on purpose. They were not trying to upset me. They were not trying to make me feel uncomfortable, but they were simply holding up a mirror to what had been passed down to me, and
Right.
what I had the potential to either alter or to
Right.
just
Address.
continue to
Yeah.
pass down to them. So
Yeah.
it's a huge one in the age of access
Right.
that we have to information, in the age of choice, because I feel like, when you mentioned about looking at our ancestors, however close or far back they go. What is this?
Backing up.
That
Back in time, up in
and
space.
there we go. I'm glad you got it.
Period.
So, however far back we go, there, because you said specifically women, as women in this age range, in this age bracket. I love that you brought me into your age bracket. Love it. We have a specific responsibility that has never been available to us. And
Absolutely.
I just want to throw something in. Like, when I was born, women couldn't have bank accounts by themselves, right? So
Crazy.
imagine the environment,
Crazy.
right? Imagine the environment and the struggles and the barriers that they were experiencing trying to survive on a day-to-day
100%. It's like
basis.
that just that in itself is enough for them to deal with. Now they're gonna go work on their like trauma as children and what family patterns were happening there. They're not even thinking. They can't even wrap their heads around that concept.
No, it's survival. I'm out here trying to survive.
Seriously. So one of the things that I thought about when you started mentioning a little bit about your mom and your two daughters and all of those things and how they kind of come full circle on holding a mirror, up to really kind of start navigating on the things like, oh, like this is a little bit problematic. Like, is this something that I am going to address and start working on for the betterment of my relationship with my family, specifically daughters? Or is it something that I'm just going to be like, to kind of
That's
like,
what it is.
it is what it is. It's who I am. So that made me think of something because growing up, when I was a kid, my parents and specifically my mom, they weren't like I didn't see them as people. I know this sounds weird. I didn't see them as people that are my parents that I get to actually know who they are or their
Okay.
truth. I saw them as authoritative figures.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the authority in the house that you're either not in trouble or in trouble with.
That's so interesting.
Isn't that wild? So that was like my experience as a kid. And of course, because it's layered in growing up in a religious household and a generally, I would say, you know, rule-filled household, lots of rules, lots of, things that you should be aware of are sinful. This is a sin in our religion. This is not a sin. This is how you behave. This is what you can do. This is what you can ask. When I was a kid, it was troubling and it was very suppressive. But when I look back, it didn't come from a bad place. Like my
Mm,
parents are incredible people. My dad and mom are some of the most incredible, beautiful human beings I know.
mm-hmm,
And in that same breath, to be like, they're also two people, two individuals in my life that gave me the most like trauma and suppression is
mm,
a pretty, I think, deep thing. And that's why I think this topic is so important
mm-hmm.
because as it become my sole responsibility to do the work 100%. And that's why I agree that well-being may be the most important legacy, because if I ignored those things that I knew started surfacing in my later adult life, like mostly like after, like between my 30s and like 35 is when a lot of things surfaced in my life.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things surfaced that I couldn't really explain. I was like, I didn't think this was a big deal. Self-expression, authenticity, the courage to actually be your full authentic self, you know,
Or even knowing what that means.
even knowing what that means, right? Because it always came with a layer, especially as a brown girl, right? Moroccan, grew up in New York, grew up in Queens, that layer of you can't be a disappointment to your parents.
Mm. You don't want to draw attention to yourself for the wrong
You
reasons.
can't do exactly. And our culture, it's all about like how do the parents look as parents? How well of a job did they do? If their kids are successful, that means they
It
are.
reflects well on them.
Yeah, exactly. And so while I understand that logic, don't get me wrong, that is a effed up way to think
Mm.
about humanity and an individual spirit and an individual soul that is here, in my belief, with their own thing, their own soul contract, their own journey that is so rooted in them actually learning who they truly are. And now it's like layered with all this gunk and this like a web of thoughts and fears and doubts that's like
Mm.
entangled with what are the parents gonna think? What's society gonna think? What's religion gonna think? Is this allowed? So everything you begin to do and think has that kind of filter, right? And so
Mm.
are you even ever authentic? And in my belief, and even what I teach my clients, authenticity and health are directly related.
100%.
Authenticity and vitality are directly related.
Authenticity and breath related.
Exactly. And so, yeah, this is really an important topic to speak about because it's like, when and how do we finally realize that we are fully responsible for that legacy of elevating our well-being,
Mm.
despite what we may have been given with our kind of upbringing, with our kind of parenting, with the kind of suppressing thoughts, whether you grew up in a religious household or not, whether you grew up with strict parents or not, no matter what kind of trauma we went through, no matter what it is, no matter what ethnicity you are, whatever it is that you went through as a kid,
Mm.
if it ever brought any kind of suffering or hardship or resistance to your authenticity, it does become a pattern in our DNA for less vitality and depleted wellness. And it is our responsibility to rejuvenate that, to like reignite that, to feel more vital in our life. So the question becomes, how do we go about that?
Well, before we get to that bit, there's so many things that you said that had thoughts coming up for me. And
Yeah.
one of the things was how interesting it was that you viewed your parents not as individuals, but simply as basically law enforcement. These are the
Yeah.
people who enforce the law. So that understanding of familial relationships is so impacted by that belief of who your parents are in relation to you and then the role that you must perform. And the reason I wanted to
Right.
hone in on this was wellness is an idea that is, I feel like we in society look at it as a luxury.
Hmm.
Wellness is not something that is on par with the things that we need to pay attention to. There are things that are speaking more loudly. How much finance? Finance is always such a loud voice. And that encompasses how am I going to work? How am I going to perform in work? How am I going to maintain my work? How am I going to feel connected enough to want to show up to work? And then I'm surviving that work idea in order to just have fun on the weekend and just completely disconnect if I don't love my work. And there are whole convos around that.
Right.
But it's if we understand how our relationship to our parents and significant authority figures in our life growing up give us the blueprint for what we believe is possible and
Mhm.
how well we feel in expressing that. It changes everything about the interactions that we have, about what we believe that we are worthy of, because so much of how we act or don't act, the things we say yes to, the things we say no to, is rooted in whether we think we deserve it or not, whether we think we're allowed to, whether we think, or we,
Oh,
the permission that we give
100%.
ourselves.
Oh, I just got chills you saying that. First of all, permission and being allowed and not getting in trouble has been like a theme in my life. And when you think about it, it's only in recent years that I've been able to develop, first of all, the clarity and the worthiness of like the incredible being that I am and the power that I have, but also in seeing my parents as who they are, like getting to understand that they too had their own life journey and their own traumas and their own ways and upbringing that led them to be the kind of parents that they are. And while they were incredible parents and they gave us so much, we traveled all the time. Like we were not missing a thing as kids. So like that's another thing too. A lot of people think like if you feel like you've been hurt or traumatized as a kid, it means you had like a terrible life.
Yeah, and
And
it's
I always talk
not.
about that. There's like a dichotomy. There's like there are so it's so much more complex than just it's not black and white. I had a very happy life. My parents like spoiled my sister and I. We had gifts all the time. We traveled all the time. We had amazing food. We lived in incredible neighborhoods. Like my parents worked their asses off. They came to this country. They came to New York when I was 6 years old. Immigrants, from Morocco, they worked their tails off. But when we talk about wellness and vitality and that essence of feeling good, feeling healthy, feeling like so in your skin, that was missing in my life because I grew up in a household that was about being a good, like a girl,
A good
right?
girl, yeah.
And for whatever reason, a lot of us like grow up thinking like a good girl can't be like her authentic self. Like it's scary that by default, oh my God forbid this girl is really her authentic self. She gonna do some crazy. Like it's like what thought process made it that if we don't follow these rules, if we're not exactly by the book, no matter what book it is, right, that you're indoctrinated by, that if we're just authentic and genuine and really like true to ourselves, we're gonna be these devious people.
And that is a whole convo
That's a
in
whole combo.
itself. A
I know.
whole
It's a
convo
lot, girl.
in
It's a
itself.
lot.
But and that coming back to that
We need to write that down in
idea
our notes.
of giving ourselves the permission to believe that we deserve to have the things that we want fundamentally changes how we then communicate with other people around. Because if I feel I'm having this conversation with you and I don't deserve to be here, I don't deserve to be heard, or I don't deserve to express the way that I feel, that shuts down what becomes
Mm,
available for me to communicate with you. And in that shutting down, I don't honor myself. And then I take that feeling with me. I take that feeling. It doesn't feel good,
everywhere you go, yeah.
because I'm trying to be this good girl, and a good girl listens, and the good girl does what she's supposed to do, and a good girl, and I know so many people hearing this will understand that
Oh,
idea of being a good girl. And when we decide to work on ourselves and to turn inwards, that's a lot of that good girl programming will reveal itself. And
mm.
if there are people who are men who are listening and tuning into this, is understanding how that affects.
Or anyone,
Yeah,
non-gender conforming too. Any
absolutely.
human who
A
resonates.
human listening to who doesn't necessarily relate to that idea personally,
Right.
but understanding that the impact of when you deal with people who've experienced good girl programming and how that affects You know, because I feel like people might feel like, why aren't you telling me how you feel? Because it feels too hard for me. As a good girl, I'm not really allowed to tell you how I feel. I'm not really allowed to have a voice. I'm not really allowed to disagree. And but just expanding that outwards, however you have experienced that imprint and expectation on behavior from, as you said, wherever that comes from, whatever the playbook is it stilts our ability to be true in the world and to be real and to have the conversations that matter. So instead of things being like clear and smooth, this is the conversation we think we're having, and then we're having this conversation because you're hearing it the way that your concept of life has been imprinted and
Right.
impacted, and I'm hearing it in my way. And we don't understand that the not feeling connected to our well-being, not feeling well in ourselves enough to be able to have those clear communications. That looks like, how were the world wars started? How were those wars started? It sounded like there were a couple of people who were upset and disgruntled by not feeling okay in themselves. And the way that they chose to express that was so detrimental to the whole of humanity, to every single person. They had so much influence and power in their not feeling good and
Mhm.
not feeling connected to their wellness in themselves that they just thought they'd bring the whole world along with them.
Oh my God. So perfect for you to bring that. First of all, as you say that, I just got this thought. Like, imagine if it was the kind of world where well-being was at the forefront of every conversation before anything was decided on. What is the state of well-being for you in this context? And what is the state of well-being for you in this context? And can we share and can we discuss and can we make the focal point be the betterment of the well-being of everyone and come to where it's like not even thought about. It's not even considered
Hmm.
that well-being is at the root of all the all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, and we can look at this on all levels. So when we are in utero, and that the well-being that the our mother takes and the care she takes of herself, and the
Exactly.
way that that impacts us physically. Now, there was a study, I think it was taken in Norway. I don't know the name of the study, but it was taken in Norway over a period of 20 years, and they looked at the mental and emotional health of mothers and
Mm.
who pregnant mothers, and how following those children over a 20-year period to see how their mental and emotional well-being and health was
I think I remember
impacted.
reading about this study.
Yeah. So it's like it's so intrinsic into our experience, but because it's not something that we're taught to focus on, and we're not bringing it into our line of vision about what makes a human being a good human being and that good human life experience, it's just kind of, well, it only matters if it gets too loud, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. If it becomes really problematic, then we
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah, if I feel like, if my, I can wrestle with my thoughts, and then if my mental and emotional health gets to a state where it's escalated, then I'll pay attention, even though there are little clues constantly along the way in our day-to-day life. So having information like that, which confirms the depth of the impact that these cellular imprints that are made from before we are physically born into this earth, and how that we carry that along and through into our lives, is significant. And yet we are schooled into the things that just happen here: maths, English, blah, 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 all the things.
Yeah.
And if we were able to introduce that, not, we don't need to get rid of those things, but just introduce the level of importance of understanding what our well-being looks like, of understanding how significant it is, particularly in our formative years, because there is the thing of our generational impact, but then
Oh
also
yeah.
when we go into school and how do we socially adapt to that experience given the programming that we've been instilled with? And how do we recognize signs that our well-being is out of whack for us? And what can
Right.
we do to start then working with that? That legacy is is massively devoid, in my opinion.
Mm.
So there's the generational impact, how that comes into who we are, then the impact that that brings into society and the way that we interact. So this legacy is pretty darn serious.
I think it's such a nice topic to really discuss and have our listeners and those watching really contemplate and even like consider and reflect on what their own, right? What their own impact of their upbringing, their parents, their family relationships, all the things that impact the well-being of ourselves as individuals.
Hmm.
It's so important to also kind of detach from that responsibility of someone else needs to take care of this. I think that's also big too, right? Because while there is so much truth and while it is so valid that our generational trauma is so real,
Hmm.
we cannot improve and we cannot elevate our well-being if we stay stuck on, well, that's what happened then because of that is why I'm like this.
Yes, like getting into blame culture.
Right. Getting into blame culture or getting into like resignation culture. Like, well, I mean, that's all they had. That's what they needed to do. And I'm just gonna keep going where it's like, no,
Mm.
the power of epigenetics, nature versus nurture, like there is truth and actually taking a conscious choice
Hmm.
and making conscious decisions and taking the kind of actions that will directly impact the well-being of ourselves in for betterment for all.
Yeah.
Whether we want to, bring in a family into this world ourselves or not. I know you're a mom. I'm not a mom, but I know that if for me, I am so committed to that kind of growth and that kind of healing that if I did ever have kids, I want to be the type of mother that isn't reliant on just the default setting
Mm. Mm. What
because of
came
my
before?
what came before. It is I would be the kind of parent that will literally proudly say, I did the work to be this kind of
Mm.
mother.
Mm. And do you know what? I think it's so important to that you've highlighted that because it's not just about having children because
Right.
we all have our paths, we all have our journeys. And yet when we do this work around our well-being and understanding the legacy that we've been passed on and making a choice to alter the legacy we leave, we are leaving it into the world. We are leaving it into the consciousness by every interaction that we have,
Right.
however subtle. The responsibility, the ownership of up leveling. I want to upgrade my experience of the world and I want to upgrade who I
Always,
can be as a
always down for
result.
an upgrade. I'm
Yeah,
always
you know those
down
cheeky
for
little
an
upgrades. We love them. And because just because it makes the world a better place.
upgrade. And that should be important. That should be important to
And
more of
and,
us. So,
and I think, you know, just saying that has reminded me that it's easier to look for the points of disconnection, look for the points of where things aren't working. And I say this is a three line because I see them everywhere. And it's easy to look at them and then get stuck
yeah,
and not recognize that even though I might not be able to, if say if I had a problem with the whole world and how it's governed, right? Let's imagine I had this issue
hypothetically.
hypothetically, and I felt helpless because I personally, one, couldn't overthrow things and put in a new system. Because, well, what system would I put in? That's a whole convo. But instead of getting stuck in that helplessness,
Mm,
remembering that my choice to upgrade myself directly through my points of contact does make a difference. And we've spoken about this before,
Yes.
but that's I guess the evolution of the awareness, because we it's not about just knowing the things or seeing the things or taking stock, because a lot of people won't even realize the impact that their childhood and their upbringing has had on who they are. So, as you said, this invitation to even contemplate what
Yeah.
that looks like in our own lives. And as we work with that contemplation, see that there is something that we can do with that. We don't just get stuck there. We have the power, we have
Right.
access to information, we have so many tools that can support that evolution and moving forward.
And taking that beautiful responsibility, because sometimes that word itself comes so heavy to us sometimes, like just taking that responsibility to do the work, to
Mm.
contemplate and to reflect on what that really means for us, for making our well-being, our legacy is just so beautiful. So I love this episode. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in to A Whole Convo with Ella and Iman.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
That is a wrap on this week's convo. We had a blast talking to you.
Thank you for sharing your time, hearts, and minds with us.
We hope this episode left you thinking, feeling, and maybe even breathing a little deeper. If it moved something in you, please share it, text it to a friend, or just sit with it.
Remember, the power of change can start with the simplest convo.
And if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our show so you never miss a moment of the magic. And if you're curious about any of our services and offerings, check out the show notes for all the links and goodies. We're so grateful you're on this journey with us. Until next time,
Stay rooted, stay whole.